All right, so here's your Pear Deck link. And share my screen. Meow. It is Thursday, April 7th, 2022. And before we get started, I do want to make a quick announcement. I changed tomorrow's lesson from the Great Society to, we're just going to go ahead and get right into civil rights tomorrow. Mostly because Great Society kind of happens towards the end of the civil rights movement and culminates with the signing of the Civil Rights Act. And it just kind of didn't fit with what we had been talking about with Vietnam and the Cold War and what we're talking about here. So I made a change. I just decided to, let's just go ahead and get started with the civil rights movement. That way we can, we're going to have 3 days next week. And then, we'll have 4 days on it, and we may take longer because I don't want to leave anything out. I don't want to gloss over anything. I want to make sure we hit everything because there's a lot of good stuff in that topic. So again, I changed tomorrow's workbook. I know some of you already did it. I just went ahead and gave everybody 100 on it. So you all got a free A. Okay. So if you see that 3.9 Great Society on your to-do list, just ignore that one workbook, 3.9. Spring break, we come back April the 25th, Jaden. But again, everybody got a free 100 on that workbook. Great job, everybody. You guys did great. Again, there's that Pear Deck link. I got 5 of 32. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Rose, glad to see you made it back. What's your stress level today? And I gotta say, I don't think I'm at a 1. You're good. You're good, Rose. Luckily, we record it, so if you missed anything or you kicked off, you can always go back and watch it. What's up, Larry? If you're over here, send me a message. If you're in this section here, send me a message. Let me know what I can do to bring that down. How'd it go, Larry? What's up, Ben? No, you're good, man. We just got started. Here's the link. Oh, you were at a big site? Where are you at, Larry? Well, I mean, there's like big sites in like Cincinnati and Cleveland and Akron and Columbus. Those are all, Dayton, I think, are all the really big sites. Toledo. I don't even know where Westchester is, man. What's up, Autumn? And there's your Pear Deck link. Let's look at the counterculture of the 1960s. All right, so our learning target today is to analyze how the Cold War and conflicts in Vietnam influenced domestic politics between the end of World War II and 1992. Guys, we're going to be looking at the hippie movement, the counterculture movement, the anti-war movement, all of that stuff. And we're going to kind of compare it to today. But real quick, I want to know, what do you think about when you hear the term counterculture? What comes to mind? How'd it go, Sir Stanley Wells? Yeah, did you take the U.S. history test? Everything made sense? Then don't say I don't know. Don't say I don't have a clue. Give it your best shot. If you truly don't know, or you can't think of anything when you hear the term counterculture, just say I don't know yet. Or, I'm excited to learn more information about it. But don't say I don't know. That's a cop out. Again, it's just an opinion. What do you think about when you hear this term, counterculture? That's awesome, Sir Stanley Wells. It's good to hear. What do I want you to think, Jerome? I want you to think for yourself, man. I just want your opinion. When you hear that term counterculture, what comes to mind? What do you think it means? Jakaon, I love it. Kitsch art. Ben says, when somebody is trying to convince you to do something. Lakota says, I don't know yet. Kalel says, I think I heard it before, but I'm not sure. But he's ready to learn about it. Skylar says, against the common culture. Ding, 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 ding. You're talking about speaking up, rising up, fighting the man, fighting the power. All right, let's talk about this rise of the counterculture. At the start of the Vietnam War, as we mentioned a couple days ago, most Americans supported the war because they believed in defending South Vietnam from the oppressive rule of communism. As when we really get involved in Vietnam in like 1962, 1963, when it like full-scale U.S. operations with military, right? Almost 20 years have gone by since World War II. And in that almost 20 years, our entire foreign policy has been wherever communism pops up, we need to step in and fight it because it's going to be a problem for us, right? We saw it in Korea. We saw it it happened in China after World War II. It happened in Korea, and we were successful in keeping North Korea from taking over South Korea. And now it's happening again in Asia and Vietnam, right? But as the war drags on, television and the news is going to bring horrific images of war into America's living rooms. Right? We're going to institute a draft. We're going to start to see dead bodies on TV. We're going to start to see horrible atrocities like we talked about with the My Lai massacre. And support for the war is going to turn into open and vocal and sometimes violent protest. Just like in the 1920s, traditional values and behavior is going to change in result to the growing political tensions surrounding Vietnam. And the counterculture movement of the 1960s is going to begin as a result of the United States' involvement in Vietnam. And we're going to see that with an anti-war movement. The Vietnam War is going to divide Americans along social, along political, and along generational lines. So parents, grandparents, kids, we're going to be divided along those generational lines, along with socially and politically. We're going to see grassroots peace movements start to arise all around the country. Their spokespeople will cry out against the war, calling it a moral disgrace and an economic drain on society. Investigative journalism is going to start gaining momentum. If you're in, like, again, the Northeast Ohio and you get the Cleveland News, you get the I-Team investigation, right? That's investigative journalism, where we're going to start questioning everything on the news and start trying to figure things out of what's really going on. Many reporters are going to be on the ground in Vietnam following the actions. You're going to have whole units and battalions assigned reporters who will follow them around as they march and do missions in Vietnam, and they're going to report on what's going on. Along with the positive and heroic stories that they'll write about the military endeavors in Vietnam, they're also going to record scenes of violence and shame. Reporters with film cameras will capture the last moments of young soldiers fatally wounded by hidden snipers. They'll film people dying, and they're like, as they're laying on the battlefield crying out for their mother or their wife, or saying like, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. They're filming it and sending it back to the news, and people are seeing that on TV. The reporters are going to be exposed to incidents where U.S. troops caused the death of innocent peasants who just happened to be in the line of fire, right? Like we talked about yesterday with the My Lai massacre, where the Marines just started slaughtering women and children in a village, right? They're gonna see there's going to be more instances of that, maybe on a smaller scale, but the reporters are going to see that, and they're going to report that back. And the people in the United States, the citizens here, we're not going to be happy about it. A lot of us aren't. And these scenes, again, they're going to play out on the evening news, where often when families are sitting around in front of the TV eating dinner from TV trays. right? As they're sitting around a dinner, they got the TV on, they're watching, and this is what they see. News reports are also going to expose how the American military was destroying Vietnam's environment and unleashing harmful chemicals into its soil and water, like Agent Orange is one, napalm is another. Agent Orange was an is a herbicide. Basically, it killed plants, and they would fly over these jungles of Vietnam and release this Agent Orange, and it would basically kill the jungle where the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong were hiding. And then they would just burn it down. Then that poison would get into the rivers and go downstream and kill a lot of fish and just be really harmful on the environment. And then on top of that, we were dropping napalm, burning things down, burning down villages, and it was killing civilians and things like that. And with young soldiers dying every day in the war, money began being taken away from social programs to fund the conflict. And an increasing number of Americans, especially the younger generations, began to protest what was occurring. A major source of the tension revolving around this is the draft. We're going to institute a military draft for service in Vietnam. Drafts it's something we've done in the past before, and they're used as a way to supplement the number of volunteers who come forward to serve. So our military is 100% volunteer based, right? You choose, you volunteer to join the military. You sign away your life on the dotted line at 18 or 21 or whenever you decide to go in for however many years you decide to go in, and then you can get out of the military after that, right? Nobody's forcing you in. In countries like Switzerland, right, it's mandatory for citizenship from the age of 18 to 21, I believe, from 18 to 21, you have to serve in the military. In Israel, from 18 to 21, you have to serve in the military. Everybody serves as part of their rules of citizenship. In the United States, it's 100% voluntary. Unless there's instances of war and emergency when we can institute the draft. And that's what happens. And a lot of people are upset because they don't see this as a war that's justified, right? World War II is often seen as a war that was justified for being fought. Vietnam is not seen that way. On top of that, a lot of men who were drafted, who were wealthy or well-educated, found ways around serving. You could basically get out of the draft if you were rich or if you were an educated, college-educated student. So it became a rich versus poor thing on top of that. And then to add to it, at the time, the voting age was 21, not 18. Right, so you couldn't vote until you turned 21, and you couldn't drink until you turned 21. But you could get drafted at 18. And a lot of young men were resentful of the fact that these men, these politicians who voted and instituted this draft, who they're not old enough to vote for, are now telling them they have to go die for their country. Again, without any say, any political say from them, because you can't vote until you're 21. So a lot of people they gathered to protest the draft, and it ultimately led to the adoption of the 26th Amendment, which is going to grant voting rights to all citizens 18 years and older. So something good is going to come out of that. But we're going to see college students who are attending school receive draft deferment. So even if they get drafted, they can defer it down the line while they're in school. There's going to be many young men who are drafted in the military service were of lower socioeconomic status, meaning they were poor, they were less educated, and it begins to be seen as poor men fighting a rich man's war. And according to critics, over 3/4 of the U.S. ground troops in Vietnam came from lower classes of society, socioeconomically. So a lot of young people sought ways to evade being drafted into the Army. They were nicknamed draft dodgers, and they used many strategies. They joined the Coast Guard. They became a minister or a rabbi. They convinced a doctor to sign a military release. A lot of people fled to Canada or Mexico to avoid being drafted. Journalist and activist David Harris led a major draft dodging movement. He encouraged groups of his followers to burn their draft cards and to fight their draft in civil courts if they were chosen. By the end of the 60s, the United States had to use a lottery that would randomly select who would be called to serve. And there were also, they set stricter standards for deferments. Okay. So that's the anti-war movement. How do we feel about that? Does it make sense to us? Where you at? Kalel, you lost? Again, here's that Pear Deck link. Please log in and participate. What's up, Kyoshi? Guys, all you gotta do is drag your dot. That makes sense? If you're a little confused or you don't know what we're even talking about. All right, guys, we're going to move on here in 3, 2, 1. So during this rise of the counterculture, right, this opposition to the mainstream and ways of thinking, we're going to see America's youth really start to speak up. And the campaign to avoid the draft and to end the Vietnam War is not going to be the only major movement. Young people across the country are going to start to demand reform. They want to see desegregation. Remember, this is a time in the 1960s. It's not until 1964 that the Civil Rights Act is signed and segregation is outlawed nationwide. Okay, that's 60 years ago. We still had black and white bathrooms, black and white water fountains, black and white sections of restaurants. Right? So in the 60s, young people are going to demand desegregation. They're going to demand more free speech, right? You could be punished for saying certain things, especially if you were black and you spoke out against things publicly. You could be punished. They're going to challenge traditional lifestyles and values that were familiar to many Americans. Many of these people, they're going to come from well-to-do families, and they're going to reject materialism and consumerism, which were tenets of their parents' generation, which is that post-World War II, 1950s, everything's great, the economy's booming, let's buy a house, let's buy a Cadillac, let's buy a boat, let's buy a TV, like, we're going to buy all this stuff, keeping up with the Joneses, have a nice, perfect green lawn and a white picket fence, right? That idea of materialism and consumerism, you know, this status idea, if you have this, this, and this, then you're doing really great. They're going to reject all of that and say it's meaningless. We're going to see women start to fight against settling for the traditional role of being a domestic housewife and a childbearer. They're going to demand expanded work opportunities and equal rights there. We're going to see others who are interested in challenging the very traditions and norms of both gender and marriage. For many, it's going to be a time of exploration and searching for deeper understanding through various means. This means that some of these people sought to expand their consciousness through sexual freedom, drugs, and alcohol. Politics is also going to see a major change during this time. Young people are going to drive the counterculture movement, showing interest in particularly left-wing politics. In 1960s, the Students for a Democratic Society is founded and established as a home base as the New Left. This term is coined to criticize the oppressive power of bureaucracy, and it's going to advocate for more participatory democracy and engagement of the people. It's really going to take shape in 1964 at the University of California in Berkeley, where there's going to be a whole free speech movement that's going to start after college administrators attempt to control the students' political activity. We're going to see them mimic the types of peaceful protests utilized during the civil rights movement, i.e. Martin Luther King with sit-ins and nonviolent protests. And these are going to take control of other various anti-war and anti-draft campaigns. But some of these protests are going to become more heated and radical. Other protest groups at the time turned to violence to wage their protests. The Youth International Party, or Yippies, not hippies, Yippies with a Y, were known for several violent demonstrations that had to be broken up by police. People were debating what it meant to be an American during this time. Recreational drugs and free love became prominent. Advocating for abortion rights became a hot button topic for the first time in the United States. Feminists made their stand as women across the nation clamored to establish their identity and pursue better positions in the workplace. The National Organization for Women was created in 1966 and fought for the changing of the traditional role of women in society. Overall, the 1960s are going to be a time where reformers sought cultural and social change. In essence, guys, basically, Americans are going to transform the way they live and how they relate to one another in the 1960s. So, what are your thoughts on this? And do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts out loud about what we just talked about with the youth of America standing out? Do you see any similarities, any parallels with anything that's going on today? Skylar, you see similarities with this youth movement and anything going on today? Sir Stanley Wells, what do you got? Go ahead and unmute yourself. Talk out loud. I mean, you can type it, but I think it's just quicker. Okay. Sir Stanley Wells says the youth movement. Skylar said people who are supporting the LGBTQ plus are mostly youth. Typing is faster for you. That's fine. I guess I'd have to agree with that. That the LGBTQ plus movement is driven by mostly youth. You're seeing protests, you're seeing movements. I would say the Black Lives Matter movement from a couple years ago. Those movements in particular are mostly driven by younger people. What do you got, Skylar? You want to add anything?
Yeah. So the people that mostly are protesting are generally younger people because they generally seem to see the problems quicker. It's what seems to be the thing, and then they're all protesting it, and that happens a lot. Like it's happening here. Weren't they the same ones protesting during World War II? Were you?
There were.
Yeah, it's just a common thing throughout history. The youth protest during it.
I do think you're correct there. It is a very common thing throughout history, the youth rising up and challenging social norms, which is, I think, it's also a healthy thing. But I also think if we let's try to flip and see it from that older perspective, right? You've lived your whole life seeing the world through this lens and this set of viewpoints and this the way society is deemed this acceptable, and now something's coming, somebody younger than you that hasn't experienced as much, hasn't lived long enough, hasn't seen as much, as coming and telling you you're wrong. How would you react to that? Would you just blindly accept and say, hey, this person like that's 20 years younger than me, obviously they know more than me with their infinite knowledge? Or would you challenge back? So Stanley Wells says, I'd let them educate me because, things change over time. That's a very mature statement. I'd be lying if I said that I didn't push back before I tried to educate myself further. Because that's a very human nature thing. Change is scary, right? We don't, as people, we don't like change, but eventually we learn to embrace it and we grow with it, right? That's the goal, at least that's my opinion. But let's look at the hippies, guys. Last big slide. The hippies, the peace, love, and the groovy threads. These guys are going to be iconic in the 1960s. These free spirits will embody much of the counterculture feel of the times. In the rebellious 60s, hippies are going to become synonymous with the general public's discontent. Right? People are going to be like, hippies. Hippies hate death metal. Make love, not war is going to be the motto for hippies, promoting free speech, free love, free expression, and peace. They're going to be associated with music. Okay, music is going to play a huge role in this movement. Bob Dylan, the Grateful Dead, Woodstock, hippies are going to be associated with these acts. Hippies are mostly young people, and many of them are going to become from well-to-do families, upper to middle-class families. But they're going to drop out of mainstream society as a protest of materialism, inequality in the Vietnam War. Basically, what I'm saying is a lot of hippies are able to do this because they have the privilege to do so. Right? They're not. Many of these people are not living the life that they're protesting against. That doesn't make it. That doesn't negate their ideas and their support and their involvement in the movement. It's just what it is. The hippie phenomenon is going to be strong from the mid 1960s through the 1970s, and from the United States, it spread throughout the world. And I've got here some Vietnam era protest songs. If you click the links, let me put it on. Let me put it on student page. So if you want to click the links, you can. These are just a couple songs. And then finally, guys, your exit ticket. What'd you think about today's lesson? Yes, certainly. The punk movement's going to come as a result of the hippie and the 60s movement in the 70s. And it's going to evolve from that music and take influence from a lot of that. You're absolutely right. All right, so let's take a look at what we're doing today. First, you got workbook 3.8, Rise of the Counterculture. This should be super easy because all of this came from this. But this is one, guys. I'm pretty excited. I want to go over it with you. I thought this was a really cool idea. I gave you guys 5 different protest songs from this era, and you can choose any other protest song that you want from this era. You don't have to choose the 5 that I chose for you, but you're just going to use this Google Doc here, the song analysis document, make a copy of it, and answer the questions about the song that you choose. If you'd like to print out a copy and take a picture of it and submit it, that's fine. Just make sure all the questions and answers are clear and legible in the picture. But I posted some Spotify links for some pretty famous Vietnam era protest songs, like Fortunate Son from Creedence Clearwater Revival, Ohio. This is about the Kent State shootings by Neil Young. Really, it's by Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, but Neil Young was the writer of the song. And you get a YouTube link because Neil Young famously recently has pulled all of his content from Spotify because he disagrees with Spotify's choice to carry the Joe Rogan podcast, which Neil Young deems as responsible for spreading misinformation in this country. So hence you get a YouTube link instead of a Spotify link. The Eve of Destruction by Barry Maguire. The Revolution will not be televised. This is kind of aimed at Gil Scott Heron was a poet, and this is kind of aimed at Black America at the time. It's spoken word with it's like jazz spoken word. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty good. And then you've got The Times They Are Changing by Bob Dylan. That's song number 5. And if you like this assignment and want to hear more protest songs, here's a Spotify playlist I found that's got some songs from this era as well as some newer protest songs and about different things like here. And then another link to the document. Okay, this assignment's due April 25th, and it's a bigger assignment. It's 25 points. But guys, you're listening to songs and you're answering a question about it. You only have to pick one song to analyze. But feel free, expand your music taste a little bit. Find out what was inspiring this youth movement and this counterculture movement in the 1960s. It was this music. All right, guys. Target sessions at 12:30 and 2:30. Please reach out if you have any questions. We are almost to spring break. We're about a week away from our last class before spring break. All right, you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll see you all tomorrow.